What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, March 8, 2018. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, so let's get on into it. Our third hour guest today will be Wolfgang Halbig, talking about his observations regarding the Parkland shooting. So we're looking forward to that. We just hooked up last night and arranged that, so sorry that we didn't have more advance notice about that. And of course, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 tomorrow. First of all, happy International Women's Day, and everybody's like, wow, International Women's Day. Apparently some McDonald's have taken the golden arches on their signs outside the restaurant and flipped them over to make a giant W. And I look at that, and the first thing that I think of is, when is International Men's Day? Because it does seem like there's a bias out there in our society. Well, if you're watching TV, Trump has just now announced that he will move forward with the tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. They go into effect about 15 days from now. The trade war has just started for real. And, of course, Mexico and Canada are very concerned about this, and Trump is saying he may grant them an exception if they're willing to renegotiate the NAFTA deal. So this is going to get nasty before it gets any better. We already have a caller online, Karen Quinn Tostado. Oh, Karen, long time no hear from. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Michael Rivero. First of all, I want to say thank you so very much for all the hours that you put into United We Strike, and for all the help that you gave me, and all the airwaves, the time on the airwaves, because I really appreciate it. And although it didn't go where we were hoping it would go, Michael, all of a sudden, I see light at the horizon, and I would like to share that United We Strike has put the New World Order on notice, starting March 15th as a global day of independence for the people. I've also just realized that I've talked to another friend of mine who is also involved in United We Strike, who's been successfully winning in the legal part. So what I want to say is that I ran up my credit cards, I walked away from them. The reason that I didn't stay with United We Strike was I still wanted to be respectful and live up to what other people's expectations were. I almost died last year. I was so sick. I refused to go to a hospital. If I had, I would have had a bag on my hip. I just went through it again this last week, 2 weeks actually. I've been in bed and asking my inner guidance, what am I missing? What do I need to learn here that I just don't get? And I'll tell you, it was extremely painful, and I actually thought that I might be dying again, and I came out to call up the acupuncturist who I'd seen last year, who had helped me, but because I was a new patient, I had to wait like 3 weeks. So I called up on a Thursday morning to say, "Man, is there any way you can get me in an emergency?" And she knows my history, and she definitely heard I was ill, but she was booked because she really cared about her patients, and she was booked until Monday at 10:30. In my mind, had I been the acupuncturist, I would have said, give me a second, and I would have called my regular customers to see which one of them would have been willing to wait instead of coming in on Thursday and come on Monday because they were feeling okay. But
okay, Karen.
And then I would switch.
Karen, this is sounding more like a personal phone call than a call into a political talk show. Yeah, we need to sum up here.
And what it is, Michael, is I've given up everything, and I've learned that the only healing is within myself. I'm walking away from everything I held dear, including my marriage. I love my husband very much. He hasn't heard me all this time. I stayed back there. I totally cleaned out my body enough to where I realized that I've got to follow my spirit. And I know this is a bunch of horse crap, and they're using live bullets now on our children. So imagine, now I'm up out of bed. I didn't even think I would be that, but because I've been only drinking distilled water, I've rebuilt myself with fruit.
Karen, I hate to cut you off, but we've got a lot of news today, and we've got other callers who are calling on in. And like I said, this sounds like a personal phone call we should have just one-on-one. Because of our prior relationship. And so with deep apologies, I'm going to say thank you. We're going to let you go because I really do need to get into the news. So we'll talk to you soon. And getting on back to the news here. Interesting little article came out of Veterans News Now calling Jeff Sessions the Mr. Magoo buffoon. And basically they're saying that Sessions is playing this, I can't see any evidence of crimes over there with the DNC and Hillary and so forth, that he's reminding people of the Mr. Magoo cartoon character, which our younger audience may not understand who that is, but you can look it up online. Now, interestingly, Jeff Sessions, in responding to pressure from Congress to appoint a second special counsel, says that he already has a Department of Justice prosecutor who is outside D.C. looking into the issues uncovered by the House Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte. Well, it certainly appears that way, but I think Sessions is just trying to duck the appointment of a special counsel looking into the Clintons. I may be wrong. I would be very pleased to find out I'm wrong. But he should be appointing a special counsel. He shouldn't be going outside and just saying, I've got this outside person looking at it, so just go away and don't bother me anymore. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Story out of Sputnik News saying the same thing about Mueller that I've been saying. It's a fishing expedition. He's just trying to find dirt on Trump, and nothing illustrates that better than the fact that he is now looking into the payment made by Donald Trump to porn star Stormy Daniels. And this is all being dragged up again. Mueller is now in the gutter at this point. And what does Stormy Daniels have to do with Russia collusion, which is what Mueller's investigation is supposed to be looking at? So it's a fishing expedition. Now, this was a little surprising to me. Basically, Trey Gowdy was doing an interview on TV about what he wants to get done, and he was asked about Hillary Clinton's email server scandal, and to my tremendous surprise, he said, well, that prosecutorial decision has already been made, that ship has sailed, and he's not interested in a special counsel to investigate Hillary Clinton's email scandal. Well, Hillary was not exonerated, and a later attorney general can reverse the decision on whether to prosecute or not. And for Trey Gowdy to be running interference on that email server scandal only reinforces my thought that Hillary Clinton was using that email server with its very weak security to pass U.S. government secrets to foreign interests, who then repaid her with generous donations to the the Clinton Foundation. And again, a scandal of this size could bring the entire government down, and that's probably why Gowdy is on board with it. But I must say, I'm very, very disappointed in his comment on that. Now, over at the Housing and Urban Development, Ben Carson is under fire because he wants to slash anti-discrimination language from HUD's mission statement in favor of language that emphasizes self-sufficiency. And Ben Carson really stepped in it on this one. Everybody's going to be screaming, the racist Trump administration. Frankly, self-sufficiency and anti-discrimination are not mutually exclusive. He should have kept the anti-discrimination language in there and added whatever he wanted to emphasize self-sufficiency. So, not very smart over there. Now, the House Oversight Committee is calling for an investigation into Barack Obama, and they're looking at the huge number of regulations enacted during his presidency. And in contrast, when it came to government surveillance, Obama deregulated everything. In fact, one of the last things Obama did in office was to sign off on new rules relaxing NSA restrictions on sharing their data with other people. In effect, anything NSA finds can now be passed on to other agencies. Now, previously, if they were to spy on someone and captured a conversation their target had with a friend, the name of the friend had to be redacted to protect his or her identity. That apparently is no longer the case, which is what led to these unmasking issues, I think. Now, getting on over to that Russian double agent and his daughter, they are apparently recovering from this chemical that was in the envelope, and they're reported to be in stable condition. They're still out there screaming, oh, this was obviously Russia, it was Russia. They were trying to get rid of him the way that they did Alexander Litvinenko. The two cases are very different. Litvinenko was a good man who attempted to expose abuses of power within Russia in defense of the rights of Russians. Skripal, the current spy, is a traitor. He sold the identities of Russian agents abroad to Great Britain in exchange for hard cash. And some of those agents may have died as a result of it. And this could be MI5 or MI6. And where it gets really interesting is this poisoned Russian spy was very good friends with a consultant who's connected to the Steele dossier on Donald Trump, the dodgy dossier. And that opens up another avenue where somebody would have a motive to silence him. Now, AIPAC is getting ready to wind up in town. Everybody's over there bowing and scraping to Almighty Israel. Right now, the Republican Jewish Coalition is calling for the resignation of 7 Democrats over their ties to Louis Farrakhan, who they consider to be an anti-Semite. And they're just out there saying, you have to leave now, you have to leave now. Speaking of leaving now, it just broke that John McCain is going to step down because of his medical issues and clear the way for his primary challenger to win the primary down in Arizona. Meanwhile, as you may know, U.S. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster is down to his last few weeks in the White House. And apparently, one of the reasons that he's out there is leaving is a long-standing effort by the Zionist Organization of America to get rid of him and get somebody more pro-Israel in there. And apparently, billionaire Sheldon Adelson was funding all of this. So once again, we see pro-Israel parties in our country trying to basically pervert our government to serve Israel's interests. It's a Vichy government. We're going to take another phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Hey, Howard Mueller caught a boot when he went fishing. That's what Trump should give him, the boot.
Yes.
You know, like, I'm still waiting on Trump to do something. What are we waiting for, you know? Like I said, the fourth term.
I agree. I mean, you know, he got his tariffs through, and he's getting his wall built, but he's turned his back on the independent media, which helped put him into office. If the independent media hadn't existed, Hillary Clinton would be president of the United States this very moment. And I keep saying, he's got to put on those presidential brass knuckles and start cleaning house and stop letting Israel push him around, stop letting Israel flood the White House with pro-Israel advisors. He was going to make America great again. Instead, he's making Israel great again.
And he's not making America great again, dancing with the Saudis. Remember the sword dance?
Yes.
That crushed me too, Mike. The Saudis are wretched. They're just wretched. You know, like, not the people, but just the government. And the percentage of the Wahhabis where, you know, they have to basically appease. Because if they don't, they'll be killed. You know, because the Wahhabis are a very powerful group in Saudi Arabia, you know. But, Mike, I got to tell people, like, I hear a lot of people, even on the forums and message boards, saying, oh, China stole our job. Or, you know, China took our job. China didn't take our jobs or China didn't steal our jobs. They were given the opportunity to, you know, work for the American people as slave labor. You know, like, I have a problem with just people just saying China's the bad guy. You know, like, I don't know, what's your take? Like, I mean, I just, people say, you know, they stole our jobs. They didn't steal it. It was given it to them.
That's
by
exactly
our own government.
Right. Well, by our own government, by our own corporations. People seem to forget that George W. Bush changed the tax laws to incentivize the offshoring of jobs. And that's really where the fault lies. China just simply took advantage of the situation. So did the corporations. They wanted to manufacture for the lowest possible cost, and they didn't care the fact that when they put their own American people out of work, then they're going to have fewer customers, and that's why the consumer economy collapsed.
And a lot of people don't know this, but NAFTA was under Clinton. CAFTA was under Bush. 5 million jobs left just under Bush alone. So
Yes.
those jobs are not coming back. I'm sorry. I mean, that's a lot of jobs, man. I mean, geez, but people don't realize what's going on. There's been a power shift going on. That's what it's come down to, and it's inevitable that you can't stop it. And Trump can try to fix something, but it's not going to help because the majority, it's too late.
Well,
we're
we're hearing all this stuff about Russia, is a threat to America's domination of the world, and China is a threat for this or that reason, and and they're pulling ahead. No, the reality is the United States is falling behind. It's an empire in collapse. It's committed economic and political suicide, and now it's just looking for a place to fall down.
And I voted for Trump. I'm not I put myself under a Democratic Party. I'm more of an independent in New Jersey, but I like Trump on his on certain of his views. But one thing I don't like Trump on, he kind of, obviously he's flip flopping like John Kerry. He's got a closet full of flip flops. But I mean, he goes off on the cuff. Mike, I wish Putin was our president. I really do. He doesn't say anything that's stupid. You know what I mean? It's just a total night and day difference between what's going on in our, destabilized country, opposed to Putin. I mean, I'm not like a Putin puppet or anything, but I mean, I don't. Did you ever hear him say anything stupid? Just as crazy,
No.
What's going on now? I mean,
no. That's why when they came out in the British press with that claim that Putin said we will poison you, it's so out of character with him. He thinks before he speaks. He's very calm. He's very polite. Can be funny when he wants to be. I mean, that kind of rhetoric. Yeah, Khrushchev talked like that, but not Putin. It was very obvious they just made that up.
yeah, the guy who's poisoned now with his daughter who's recovering.
Yes.
Yeah, he wouldn't be recovering. So it was either himself poisoning him, make it look like he was paid off because of the MI5, the British, to make to blame Russia. Blame Russia on that. Blame Russia on the doping of the Olympics. Blame Russia on invading Ukraine. We all know this is bull. It's how you can figure out it's a lie? It just keeps going on and on and on and on and on and on and on. It's too much propaganda. Too much propaganda kills the propaganda.
You're absolutely right about that.
No?
People are getting burned out with it, and every time they come out with another claim that doesn't work out, and then they try another one, It's called the spaghetti approach. You just keep throwing it against the wall until something sticks. But people are wise to that right now. That's one of the reasons the corporate media numbers are as low as they are. CNNs are down in the basement. And a lot of people think it's because they do nothing, they do almost nothing except constant Russia, 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 Russia. People don't want to hear it anymore. They recognize war propaganda when they see it.
Marsha, 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 Marsha. Hey, Mike, you know what's funny? You look at Putin. He cares about his country. He cares about the people there. He's trying to, get rid of corruption. But over here, it's just, we're all corrupt. The whole government is just, every institution, FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA, top to bottom, Mike, it's just corrupt down to the local police departments. Not all of them, but, a lot of them. It's just a lot of corruption going on. And then, people think Putin's a bad guy. He's taking care of his own people and his own country, something that we
that,
should have
of
been
course,
doing
flies in
with
the
our
face
own
of globalism. Have you ever heard the old expression, a fish rots from the head down? That's exactly what happens with nations. When the government becomes rotten and corrupt, it spreads downward through the whole society.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, Mike, it's going to take us down, and the West is being taken down with it because the fish rots down in the whole Western world,
Yes,
including the British, the French, the Germans. They're all in
Anyway,
the
got to
same
let you go.
group.
We're commercial break. Got to let you go. Thank you very much, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the telephones now. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, have you watched this year's spectacle of everybody making obeisance to Israel at AIPAC, and some of the films like Kamala Harris, my senator, and Pence, and Everybody,
I peeked
virtually
in
everybody.
a little bit, but then my stomach starts getting queasy, and I have to switch over to the cartoon channel. I did catch where Chuck Schumer came on out and said the reason there's no peace between Israel and Palestine is the Palestinians don't believe in the Torah, which that's pretty
Mike,
bad.
look where we're at here. We're killing Russians by the hundreds in Syria because of Israel. Really,
yes.
We're in Ukraine because of the neocons. Everywhere you look, George Soros is making some kind of trouble. Everywhere you look, Sheldon Adelson is buying off more politicians, building our embassy, getting us to move to Jerusalem, funding this, funding that, funding the president. Jared Kushner's everywhere. We've got the bankers who talk about the jobs being put out overseas. The bankers made money on all that, and then you look at our First Amendment rights, which are being sold down the river because everybody's afraid to criticize Israel. You can't even talk about the Holocaust. You can't even discuss it. It's beyond discussion, and anybody who brings it up, of course, is shouted down as an anti-Semite, and that is where we are.
Yeah, but remember that interview that Amy Goodman did several years ago with a former member of the Knesset, and the member of the Knesset said, it's just a trick. They shout anti-Semite because they want to scare people into talking, because people are asking questions Israel doesn't have a good answer for. So they just scream Jew hater and anti-Semite to shut everybody up. And it's a trick, and unfortunately, it works, except I think they're burning it out. It's just like CNN's ratings with the Russia coverage. Israel supporters have been shouting Jew hater and anti-Semite so much it's lost its shock value.
Well, if it's lost its shock value, Mike, they've certainly purchased more people, like more bots and talking, fake people on the web and people who are paid shills on the web to shout you down.
Yep.
They're still ruining everybody. They still have access to all of the intercepts from our intelligence agencies for all Americans that they can blackmail or shout us down or steal from us even.
Yes.
And now that we have they're willing to sell out 330 million Americans' First Amendment rights just so you can't criticize Israel. And you wonder, what is this a fifth column, would you say, or what?
Yeah, it's starting to look like it. It's starting to look like it. They want to turn the United States into Israel West, and they want us to live under the same tight controls that the people of Israel do, or rather the Palestinians do. Because they don't like us, they think we're inferior, they don't trust us, and that whole concept of God's chosen people is inherently racist, and they're raised with that from birth, that they're special, they have this unshakable sense of entitlement and superiority, and they're causing a lot of trouble here, and unfortunately our current crop of politicians is perfectly willing to sell out to them.
Mike, they're shouting at white supremacists at everybody now, but I mean, what we're really looking at are Jewish supremacists.
Yes.
And I mean, if they're controlling our foreign policy and where we go to war, which they are, if they're controlling our finances and the central banks, which they are, if they're controlling everything we see in the mainstream media and movies and everything else. Oh, by the way, there's a new movie coming out about how great the Entebbe raid is. Not to say that of course the British have said that the Entebbe raid was staged, but
yes.
There's a new movie coming out about how heroic Entebbe was.
Well, I already saw the one with Charles Bronson. I already saw the one with Charles Bronson, so I'm not going to watch it. Yeah, it is. We're living under foreign puppet rule, and we shouldn't be no more comfortable with it than the people of Afghanistan or Iraq or Libya or any of the other places that are subject to foreign puppet rule. They're very angry. They have every right to be. If Trump really wants to make America great, he has to make America American. And we have all of these Israeli government officials who are dual citizens who serve in the Israeli government, then they come here and they find their way into the U.S. government. Now, no government can serve two masters. And a government that serves Israel cannot, does not, and will not serve the American people. And that's why I keep saying, in these troubled times, we need leaders who put America first, second, and third. And I thought that's what we were getting with Donald Trump. But we did not get the Donald Trump we voted for. We got something else that is a tremendous disappointment.
Can I make one point before I go? And that is,
real quick.
You know about Ahed Tamimi, the 16-year-old Palestinian girl who slapped the Israeli soldier who entered her property and they had just blinded or basically shot her cousin in the face. But at any rate, they put her in prison, and they're going to put her in prison for years. And
okay, I got to let you go. I'm sorry, I got to cut you off because we got another commercial break. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here and getting on back to AIPAC. Our politicians are getting ready to shred the First Amendment. They want to criminally outlaw support for the boycott campaign against Israel. Now, boycotts are an internationally recognized form of peaceful protest, and peaceful protest is covered by the First Amendment. And we're starting to hear about there should be a Palestine exception to free speech. No, if there's an exception to speech, it's not free speech, it's permitted speech. And if they try and do this, this has to go all the way to the Supreme Court. And I can't imagine the Supreme Court would view restrictions on protests against Israel as anything but a violation of our First Amendment right to peacefully assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances, because a lot of what Israel is doing is being done with our money. And when you look at the gun grabbers who are always out there trying to say that those who manufacture and sell the guns bear the guilt for the murders that are committed with them, well then, we as taxpayers share the guilt for what Israel is doing to Palestine and to Lebanon and to Iran and to Syria, on and on and on. Now, Trump's Department of Justice is getting ready to release the documents regarding the Fast and Furious gun walking program that was conducted under the Obama administration and withheld by former Attorney General Eric Holder. And they're going to be released, and I can imagine that Obama's going to be very, very nervous about it. And a lot of this is coming from the brother of the border control agent who was shot by an illegal immigrant that had acquired one of these guns provided to Mexican drug cartels at taxpayer expense by the U.S. government. Now, the official story was they were providing these guns to track where they went through the drug cartels, which really does not make a lot of sense to me. What I think was happening is they wanted to create a drug monopoly to drive prices up. And so they provided weapons to this one cartel here. Now, there's a candidate for Congress who's warning New York voters to check their registrations today. It sounds like there's been another attempt to disenfranchise people by tampering with registrations again, just like they did in 2016. Now, the New York Board of Elections has admitted to illegally deleting 200,000 voter registrations in Brooklyn alone in 2016. Mostly Trump voters, I might add. Similar purges were happening all across the country. Most notably in Arizona, where the Arizona Secretary of State confirmed election fraud took place. Isn't that weird? They're disenfranchising legal American voters at the same time they're trying to get the illegal immigrants to vote. That's how skewed up and messed our election system has become. Unfortunately, I think the deadline for re-registering in New York has already come and gone. So if your registration has been altered, you can't do anything about it. That was another dirty trick that was being done. People were showing up at the polls and found their party affiliation had been changed. People who were registered as Republicans all of a sudden were being handed the Democratic primary ballot. They say, I'm not a Democrat. Well, your voter registration says you are. I mean, the election fraud in 2016 was just obvious in everybody's face. And I can't understand why Donald Trump, knowing the fight that we had to overcome the election fraud in 2016, isn't doing anything about it. Now, yes, I know the Department of Homeland Security is checking the integrity of the voting machines, but we saw on the HBO documentary Hacking Democracy how those machines can be rigged without getting inside them. And a lot of them are rigged at the point of manufacture. Bev Harris discovered that about the GEM system in those Diebold election machines. Now, Tucker Carlson was out there with a report on how the Texas Attorney General Paxton says there's ample evidence of widespread illegal immigrant voting in Texas. And all of this benefits the Democrats. Now, Judicial Watch's Freedom of Information lawsuit against the New York Police Department basically started Tuesday in New York State Supreme Court. Under state FOIL laws, Judicial Watch sought records, a final report, and key audio tape of a 1013 officer in distress call made in the 46-year-old Philip Cardillo murder case. And the New York Police Department told Judicial Watch to go to the dark regions, and instead they are now suing. A lot of dirt is coming on out here. Now, there's an interesting little follow-up. There's another case out there. Remember the 2015 attack on the Draw Muhammad event in Garland, Texas? And it started to come on out. This appeared to be set up by FBI undercover informants. And apparently a text message surfaced, sent from an undercover FBI agent to the terrorists saying, "Tear up Texas," which is what they then went on to do. And the FBI is out there saying, really, it's innocuous, it's meaningless. Everybody sends text messages saying, tear up a state. It's nothing to look at. But apparently they're nervous enough where the FBI has now asked the judge to dismiss the lawsuit because they're worried about the details about this undercover operation coming out to the public, which has already seen a plethora of these cases where supposedly somebody is a terrorist and then you find out they were basically set up by the FBI. FBI finds somebody who's easily controllable, somebody who's desperate for money. They groom them, and they basically encourage them to commit an act of terror for the media to wag at all of us to keep us afraid. And then 6 months down the road, the court throws it out as obvious entrapment. Now, the New York Times did a hit piece on the Trump tax cuts. And the New York Slimes claimed that Trump's tax cuts would increase taxes on the middle class. The Times made up an imaginary family and created an interactive showcase article that included the family's imaginary tax returns. The only problem was the Times got the math wrong, and now they've had to issue a correction on that story. Now, one of the editors of the New York Times, Jill Abramson, who was the first female executive editor, was fired by the paper. And it appears to be linked to the fact that she was launching an investigation into charges that the New York Times CEO, Mark Thompson, had a role in a sex scandal that embroiled the BBC. We have lost our compass, our moral compass as a society. All right, let's get on over into the war zones. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Remember, over in East Ghouta, Russia set up this humanitarian pause so the civilians could get out. Then the U.S.-backed militants were shooting at the civilians to keep them in their place because they need plenty of dead bodies to blame on Russia and Syria. And apparently the civilians put together a convoy of 300 families trying to just get on out despite all of that, and the militants attacked the convoy. At least 3 cars have been burned. So that is getting ugly as well. I think that counts as a war crime. Now, Russia has deployed the Sukhoi 57 in Syria. Only a few of them, some say 2, some say 4. And basically they're going to showcase this jet. This is Russia's first true 5th-generation multi-role fighter. Now, they have what they call the 4++ aircraft, and it's really close to 5th. No, there's a tremendous difference. The difference between 4th generation and 5th generation is stealth capability, obviously. the ability to fly at supersonic speeds without afterburners, which use up a huge amount of fuel, the ability to carry weapons inside a special internal weapons bay in order to maintain the stealthiness, an advanced situational awareness network capability, and it's really a tremendous difference. Now, the only other country which has a deployed real fifth-generation fighter is the U.S. with its F-22, but that has to fly within certain limits because they still have not solved the problem with the breathing system. And the pilots are having breathing problems. Now, in theory, the F-35 is also a fifth-generation fighter, but it's such a terrible design, and it's got problems. It can be outfought in a dogfight by 1970s vintage aircraft. The Pentagon has just requested $30 million for Syrian rebels' salary. They're being paid to be there by the United States. 10,000 Syrian rebels are on the Pentagon's payroll. They want to increase that number to 65,000. They're not there fighting for a free Syria. They're mercenaries. They're hired guns. Now, the Syrian army has deployed a new Russia-made radar system, the 1L-122-1E, and it's a small-sized system, but it's been spotted operating in Syria. Russia's doing great with all this. Everything they send to Syria looks good. People are going to Russia to buy weapons. Turkey just bought the S-400 missile system. And obviously, that's very upsetting to the U.S. military-industrial complex, whose real goal is to make a lot of money, to have the taxpayers pay to research and development weapons and then turn a profit selling them to other countries. But the other countries are backing off purchases of U.S. weapons. Ron Paul is still out there saying that 15 years in Iraq is enough, and it should be. But as you know, Iraq is demanding a timetable for when the U.S. is going to leave. And the U.S. is saying, no, we're going to stay. We're going to stay for however long we feel like. Now, a Saudi strike has killed 2 children, wounded several more children in North Yemen. More bodies, more civilian bodies. Apparently, 3 strikes hit a single family's home, killing a woman and her daughter. It's a terror campaign from the skies, the same thing that Hitler was doing to Britain with the V-1 buzz bomb and the V-2 missile. Just trying to beat them down where they'll accept foreign puppet rule. Now, you remember those thousands of U.S. troops that are in Israel taking part with war games, supposedly to fend off thousands of missiles being aimed at Israel. It's now been revealed that the war games are specifically dealing with an attack by Iran. Because remember what happened when we went into Iraq. Iraq understood that Israel was behind the U.S. war inside Iraq, and they started shooting missiles at Israel, which was defended by the Patriot. Not very well, but it looks like they're getting ready to defend Israel from a retaliation when eventual war on Iran takes place. Now, the Navy and Marine Corps leaders are warning that China is weaponizing capital, meaning money. And they're out there saying, they're expressing concern over China's expanding global reach. And said China's rapidly buying up foreign land to win without fighting. Well, they've got the money, they're manufacturing, they've got products to sell. War ultimately comes on down to the available money to fight it with. Right now, the United States doesn't have any money. They've got debt, huge amounts of debt. Now, as you know, the USS Carl Vinson and a 2-ship escort docked in the Vietnam port of Da Nang on Monday. They're trying to basically bring Vietnam into this coalition to deter China, and understandably, China is very unhappy over the U.S. aircraft carrier in Vietnam. I can't imagine the ordinary Vietnamese people are very happy about it either, because they all remember what happened in the 1960s and how bad it really got. The Pentagon is very concerned about the Chinese takeover of Djibouti port. They're saying it would have significant consequences for the U.S., and the concern is obviously China is getting in the way of U.S. hegemonic domination of the world, is really what it comes down to. We've been talking a lot about Russia's hypersonic weapons, which may have, in part, been based on U.S. hypersonic weapons. Remember that story that came out the other day, that along with the uranium, there was some technology transfer to Russia, military technology, by Hillary Clinton while she was Secretary of State, a replay of the 1996 Chinagate scandal. Now the worry is that China has hypersonic tech, and we know they do because there was a YouTube video of one of them being tested, and the ground was in darkness, and up where the hypersonic plane was, it was still in sunlight, so it was very, very easy to see. In fact, China may have been sending a message with that. And the U.S. Navy is now expressing concern that China's hypersonic tech poses an existential risk to the U.S. carrier fleet, meaning that not only can these hypersonic weapons get past all the current defenses that we have, but it basically obsoletes the whole point of an aircraft carrier. If they can't get near to the littoral combat zone to launch their aircraft, then they're useless. All right. Here's an interesting story. This came out of the Express in Great Britain. The headline reads, "Donald Trump lacks necessary expertise for North Korea nuclear missile disarmament talks." And this article quotes former officials and analysts who are out there. Basically, this is another attempt by the military-industrial complex to undermine the possibility of peace with North Korea because they want to go to war, because they make a lot more money that way. I imagine they're just drooling over the possibility of an entire world at war. Now, the foreign policy establishment in Washington is upset. The Trump administration is proposing to cut funding for organizations responsible for, quote, promoting democracy abroad, end quote, meaning these organizations that go into other countries and stage color revolutions to bring down the legitimate government and impose puppet rule. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. This next story should raise the hairs on the back of your neck, and it is a story that came from thebreakingtimes.com, basically saying that the Pentagon is now saying there's a possibility of a nuclear weapon strike against the United States. And this supposedly is coming from General Paul Selva, Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And he said, "There is compelling evidence that at least one of our potential competitors in this space believes they can get away with striking us with a low-yield weapon." Now, this is signaling a really nasty false flag. Nobody is going to attack the United States with a nuclear weapon without provocation, because they know the response would be their country melted down into a giant green glass parking lot, and the Marines are going to be sent on in to paint the lines. So for them to be making talk like this, notice he says low-yield nuclear weapon, meaning they don't want to cause too much damage, just enough to get everybody in a tizzy and saying, "Oh, save us from the evil nuclear powers." My concern is that if they do that, if they set off a nuclear bomb someplace in the United States, that they will then use it to justify a nuclear strike against the target country. And that could open up with everybody starting to hit the buttons and turn the keys. Because the other nuclear powers are going to realize this is just another Saddam's nuclear weapon type hoax. and they're going to realize they're all potential targets of this out-of-control, war-happy U.S. government. Getting into the economic news, U.S. trade deficit rises to $56 billion. That's the highest since 2008. And that's per month. Now, as you know, our stock market has been very volatile lately. It was another case of being mostly in the red today. It took a little bit of a dip when Trump announced the tariffs, and they got it shoved up into the green just barely by the close of the market. But we're seeing basically all of the global stock markets are starting to stutter. And this is where economic globalism comes back to bite us in the gluteus maximus, because they're all linked together. And if one has a major correction, it's going to trigger a global crash. Let's see. Basically, down in Australia, Turnbull is saying that protectionism is not in Australia's interests. Protectionism is opening the door to the trade war. And it's always a short-term patch. The problem is we need to make better quality products that people want to buy. That's basically it. We'll be right back after statement identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, hour number 2. We're talking about the economy, and there are indications that our American banks are in serious trouble. Now, not too long ago, we talked about the collapse of ABLV in Latvia, which just had to have a bailout. Third largest bank in Latvia. Their cash to deposit ratio was 13%. And when you look, and this is, forget the derivative exposure. Banks here in the United States, the cash to deposit ratio is alarmingly low. Here are some examples. JP Morgan, 98.26% of deposits are not covered. So they cover about 1.74%. Wells Fargo, 98.41% of the deposits are not covered. So about 1.59% is covered with cash on hand. That's why they're pushing for a cashless society. If there's a run on the bank, they're going to be wiped out. They don't have it. The money is all loaned out. There used to actually be laws regarding how much leveraging a bank could engage in, but those all went away. Goldman Sachs, only 1.24% of their deposits are covered by cash on hand. It's ugly. It's a very ugly situation. And it's not just here in the United States. Some of the banks in Canada are in the same situation. They're overextended. They're technically insolvent. Okay, we're going to take another phone call here. Kathleen in Paris, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. You're on the economy, so
Yes.
I wanted to talk about Catherine Austin Fitz. She was interviewed by Sarah Westall, and she's talking about the $21 trillion which is missing.
Yes.
I was shocked about this number, but she verifies it. 21 trillion missing, which has been harvested. You used that word yesterday, harvested.
Yes.
And basically stolen from
Yes.
the people. And she talked today about a thing called the common law right of offset. And what that means basically is that if I owe you $1,000 and you owe me $1,000, we just offset it on the books.
Yeah, that's a very common practice. Why bother actually going through the process of transferring assets?
Exactly. So she said, since there's not going to be a miracle or a benevolent dictator going to save us or cryptocurrency, that it's going to require some hard work of local and state municipalities and like that, cities, and that they calculate how much has been stolen and plundered and harvested, and that when comes time for the locals to pay the federal, they just say, now this part is, what you owed us because of you mishandling or stealing our money, which is missing, and you just keep it and use it for local things.
It's an interesting idea. The question would be whether we could get the courts to agree that money taken from the people and then promptly lost represents a debt owed back to the people. I understand the principle of it. It's like going on down and paying for the car and not getting the car. You're not getting what you pay for, therefore you're owed a refund. And so, yeah, that's a very interesting concept. I don't think in this corrupt government it'll go anywhere, and certainly those who were the recipients of all this missing trillions aren't going to want to give it back.
Right, but she was interesting. I've often thought, well, just where did it go? Where is it? And she says, well, it didn't burn up. She said that money is somewhere.
Yes.
And can be tracked. And if people want to hear her tell it, I had to listen to it 2 times to feel like I could talk to you about it. But it's Sarah Westall interviewing Catherine Austin Fitz.
Can you send me the URL and I'll post it on whatreallyhappened.com?
Okay.
Okay?
I'm looking forward to. Did you say how big he's going to be in the 3rd hour?
Yes, he's going to be in the 3rd hour.
Oh, good. I'm going to try to stay awake.
Okay. Well, if not, you can always listen to the podcast tomorrow morning.
Sure, I know. Thank you, Michael.
All right. Thank you, Kathleen. We're going to let you go here. Getting on back to the news. Well, first of all, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. Bill Gates, stepping away from his constant pushing about population reduction and vaccines and so forth, is out there saying there's going to be another financial crisis like the one in 2008. It's a certainty. I'm absolutely in agreement, but he's got the name value, and so obviously it must be true here. We are once again seeing home prices being driven up by flipping. And we were just saying the other day, home prices have gotten so high, Americans are slipping into poverty. They're starting to have dormitories for middle-class workers out in San Francisco. It's really that bad. And they're flipping these homes. There's a lot of homes out there sitting empty that are only for sale, back and forth to flip them and run up their value to create instant equity. So it's another giant bubble, and that too was a feature of the run-up of 2008. The people who caused the mess in 2008 did not learn any lessons from it because they were not required to feel the pain, except for AIG, of course. It was all dumped on the American taxpayer. And there's an old saying that wisdom begins when you bite off more than you can chew. But if the mouth that gets to do the biting and the mouth that has to do the chewing are not in the same head, the educational benefit is lost. Now, Bitcoin just tanked below 10,000 after the Securities and Exchange Commission says crypto exchanges must register with them. I think that would actually be a good idea when we've heard of all the fraud that's been out there with cryptocurrencies. Maybe it's big enough where now it does need to be regulated. I just wish we had somebody better than the SEC doing the regulating, because remember, the SEC looked the other way for 12 years while Bernie made off with the loot, cheated his employees and his customers. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Mike in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. You were just talking about the Bitcoin, and I was going to say they haven't shut it down, and there was another technology, because everything's advancing going forward, getting cheaper too. Computers and chips are getting cheaper, and but anyway, there's another system that they built where if they shut one exchange down, you could use another exchange right away. So, there's just, to me, I don't think there's any way they can stop it. And then there's a vigilante guy also who talks about cryptocurrencies, and he said the banks, I was looking at one of his videos today, he said the banks are deadly, they're afraid of this, this is going to just destroy, the banks. But again, the main issue is whether they can shut it down. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, possibly that China actually attempted, to shut them down. This reminds me of the when we went from analog to digital. Remember them
Yes.
days when we had dial up? We had dial up. We waited 2 minutes for a picture to download, and then the recording industry of America, or it might be whoever they are, they sued a couple people, one of which might have been $1 million, because for stealing music, but they could never stop it, and you know what I mean? They just can't now, and it's really hurt a lot of bands, because now bands have to play live. I mean, because everybody could just share. So getting back to Bitcoin, I would recommend people check it out. For $5, get a wallet. I mean, I don't have, maybe next check I was going to buy a wallet because they're like $100. But I mean, I'm going to start getting into it because, I mean, with all this nervousness now, they just destroyed the currencies essentially with their quantitative easing and they're
well, they've destroyed trust in it. They've destroyed trust in it. The reason cryptocurrencies have become so popular is because they are a means of people to carry on commerce independent of the banks. I mean, we live in a society right now where, everything that we do, the banks get a piece of the action. And they don't want to give that up. And of course, chief among them is the Federal Reserve, which makes its money by loaning Federal Reserve notes into circulation at interest. And they're not able to collect interest on cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are as big a threat to the Federal Reserve as John F. Kennedy's United States note.
Yeah, you're gonna hear a lot of propaganda because the big money is going to teach everybody that cryptos are a fraud. Look at what Jamie Dimon said. I mean, right? And he's probably trading those cryptos himself. I mean, he's just this is the biggest threat to the global banking system, and I mean, I think it should be part of our protection. Gold, silver, cryptocurrencies, definitely. I really hope.
Well, I would go with gold and silver. I would go with gold and silver because, if there's an internet crash, you're instantly cut off from your cryptocurrencies. It's a virtual currency. It has no commodity base. It's only worth what people think it's worth, which is why I've never really been enthusiastic about it. I get a strong smell of tulips. But if you want a store of wealth outside the banks, definitely metals. And right now, silver seems to be outperforming gold. So you might want to look at that. We know that Wall Street and the banks are working to keep the price of gold down to discourage people from leaving the stock market and the banks. But they can only do that for so long. And I don't think they're paying quite as much attention to silver, which may be why silver is outperforming right now. Okay, Mike.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a good day. I love your show, Mike.
Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Right now in the United States of America, where we're constantly being told that the economy is in recovery, 42% of Americans are at risk of retiring absolutely broke. When I hear the economy is recovering, what pops into my mind are drug addicts and alcoholics who are recovering. And they're recovering for the rest of their lives. And I think that's what's happening with our economy. The economy isn't really getting any better, but it's recovering, and it's going to keep on doing forever. The economy's in serious, serious trouble. All right, let's get on to immigration. A lot of stuff going on, especially out in California. Basically, Malkin is out there saying California is sabotaging the sovereignty of America. There's some very tough talk going on out there. Part of the sovereignty of a nation is control over your own borders. And basically, California is out there saying that southern border with Mexico is wide, wide open. Just come on in here. And for more than a year, these court cases, especially from the Ninth Circuit out in California, have been just filing all these legal challenges regarding the immigration policies. But those policies aren't just something Trump came up with. It is the letter of the law. It's in Title 8. And so finally, Attorney General Sessions has put on his AG brass knuckles, and he's filed suit against California. And of course, Jerry Brown is out there having a liberal meltdown. Now, there's an interesting article over at amrin.com, and it talks about a recent exchange between Tucker Carlson of Fox News and Univision anchorman George Ramos. And Ramos said, "This is not a white country." And suddenly people on TV are talking about the end of white America, the rising tide of color, and what that demographic change really means. Now, basically, Ramos is forthright Hispanic chauvinism. And you have to realize that hostility. Look at what's happening down in South Africa right now. But basically, Jorge Ramos and others on the left want America to become non-white because it will move further to the left, and Democrats will win more elections. Less white means more left. Leftists, particularly Hispanic ones, openly talk about this. One of the reasons for the war on white America is so the Democrats can just have permanent control of the country, and the Republican Party will be a thing of the past, and the entire country will look like Chicago or any of these other cities under Democratic control. Now, in the next hour, we're going to be talking to Wolfgang Halbig about the Parkland shooting. I got a couple of stories about it, and we're going to sort of set the stage here. Remember those 4 deputy sheriffs, including one who was actually assigned to that school, who stood outside while the shooting happened? Well, apparently there were 2 officers from the Miramar Police Department SWAT team who were training in Coral Springs near that school, and they heard what was going on their radios, and they rushed to assist and basically went into the school. They responded to the school. They have actually been suspended because they were not ordered to go on in. And that is very, very suspicious, because one assumes that a police officer, if they are a witness to a crime, has the authority on his own initiative to go on in and try and do something about it. But these 2 SWAT officers have been suspended for rushing to the school to try and help. Now, an article over in Chuck Baldwin Live is saying it all again. The Florida school massacre proves the police are worthless in protecting us. The liberals like to say, surrender your guns, the police will take care of you. No, they don't. The only thing that stops a bad man with a gun is a good man with a gun. Or I should say person. I'm going to have the feminists on my case now. CNN actually acknowledged the story of Kennesaw, Georgia, where the city council passed an ordinance. Every home has to have a firearm. And there's been 1 murder in the last 6 years since they did it, and their crime rate, violent crime rate, is less than 2%. Those are phenomenal numbers. Just the awareness that everybody in that town, every home in that town has a gun, is convincing the criminals to go someplace else. Someplace with strict gun control and a helpless population, like Chicago. Now, the police are starting to push back on all the criticism they've come under because of their inaction at Parkland. And the police are saying, we're the experts. Don't you dare criticize us. Now, one of the survivors of the Parkland shooting is suing the Broward School District because the deputy sheriff assigned to the school failed to act. Now, Parkland student Anthony Borges was shot 5 times during the shooting event at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and he's suing the county school system to recover the cost of his recovery, his medical bills. Now, if only Anthony had had his own gun and been trained to use it instead of being forced to rely on the police to protect him. We're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the Parkland shooting, and CNN has now admitted the accused school shooter, Nicholas Cruz, was on very heavy medication. In fact, he appeared to be on the verge of unconsciousness when he was arrested. They're not saying what medications he was on, but they're saying that, yeah, he was on these medications. It's not the guns, it's these drugs, and obviously the false flags. Article that came out from Nexus Newsfeed, the violence-inducing effects of psychiatric medication. And again, it's another one of these stories. Chris Cornell of Soundgarden committed suicide by hanging. And his family and friends said he was fine until he started taking this anti-anxiety prescription. There's a story that came on out where apparently scopolamine, which is used for seasickness, causes some people to suffer incredible hallucinations. They think they're somewhere else other than where they are. Now, there's been a court case in which relatives of Donald Shell sued Paxil because Paxil led this guy to kill himself and 3 others. And again, prior to taking the Paxil, he was a perfectly normal person. And the jury basically said that the manufacturer of Paxil has to pay $8 million to the family. Now, the lawyer had asked for $25 million, so it got cut down a little bit. And how do you... $8 million doesn't replace somebody. But it is nice that finally the courts are starting to recognize that, yes, these medications cause violence. And this is not the first case. If you go over to ssristories.org, they have a bunch of case studies where this stuff has gone to court, and the judge and jury have found that, yes, the medications were the root cause of what happened. Now, up in Baltimore, there's been a big stink. During this hard winter, the school district, claiming they don't have the money, has been keeping the schools unheated or very little heat, to the point where the kids are having to sit in the classrooms in their coats and mittens. But somehow they got the money to send 60 busloads of kids to this anti-gun march that's being planned in Washington, D.C. later this month. And they get free T-shirts and meals to go along with it. I think the parents of those Baltimore kids ought to call that school district and say, forget about the gun grabber convention. If you've got that money, you turn the heat on. Those kids are catching cold. They could catch pneumonia. Now, interestingly enough, Northeastern University did a study, and they actually found out, based on the numbers, that schools today are actually safer than they were in the 1990s. The shootings that we saw in Parkland and Sandy Hook do not represent an epidemic of gun violence. The situation is going down. In fact, numbers all across the board are showing gun violence has been in general decline. Now, turning over to the Mandalay Bay shooting, there is still a big fight going on over the information that's supposed to be coming out from there. And Jason Goodman is out there on transparency saying it's not supposed to be us versus them. And there are some oddities, well, there's a lot of oddities about that case here. When the coroner finally released what was supposed to be the autopsy report on Stephen Paddock, the accused shooter, his height was wrong. It was off by 2 inches. Kind of makes you wonder if that coroner just took a bunch of old coroner's reports, Xeroxed them off, changed the names, and put them on out there. Now, there's a video that's linked to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. The headline for you to look for and click on, Mandalay Bay shooting, eagle-eyed concerned YouTuber finds interesting shooting footage. And there is a video in there taken from down the street looking at the Mandalay Bay, and there are 2 things to look for. One is there's a helicopter flying low across the street, and as it passes the Mandalay Bay building, it looks like there's gunfire coming from it. And most people see that. What they don't notice is there appears to be a shooter on the building right at the right edge of the frame, which is not the Mandalay Bay. There appears to be machine gun fire coming from there as well. And remember, people who were there at the Mandalay Bay said they heard shots coming from multiple locations. But apparently, we reported yesterday up in Seattle where they've just started gun confiscation. No charges, no warrants, no nothing, just on the basis they think somebody might potentially be dangerous. And apparently this is a beta test, and other states are trying to do it and see if they can get away with it. Now, anybody can say, I think that person is dangerous. They're a different religion. They're straight, I'm gay, I'm afraid of them. Shepard Embellis is out there saying they don't want Americans to own firearms, they want all Americans to be slaves, and that is exactly what is on the line here. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go back to the phone lines. Joe in California. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to say a couple of things, and hopefully I don't stutter and go too much. But one of the things that I noticed recently is Bill Gates has been buying up trash collection companies under an industry called Cascade Investments, LLC, based in Kirkland, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And he's reduced the amount of trash pickups usually from about 8 times a month down to 4 times a month. And he said the solution for that is to fire the human workers and then bring in more robots and automation so that less people can do the same amount of work and have the machines do the work.
Yes.
He's not lowering the monthly cost for the consumer who's faced with getting less service. He's basically just charging you the same but giving you less for your money.
Yes.
And one of their goals is to have the person making the payment to the trash company do the recycling for the company. You know, they give you 2 cans. One is for recycling, and you do all the work. They sell the plastics, and then you buy the car back from China later after they've sold the recycled plastics. But you do all the work, and so on and so forth. And then when Bill Gates was questioned on it, he said, well, the solution, if anyone complains about the humans losing their jobs, is you just tax the robots.
That doesn't bring the jobs back. I mean, that's utterly ridiculous. If you start taxing the robots, actually that's a good idea because it will disincentivize this transition to automation. And I think that would be a really good thing. If Trump wants to bring the jobs back, then we do need a very stiff tariff on robots. And that's actually a good idea.
Well, I think that robots or anybody that's decided to get rid of the human race and then the answer is more taxes and more fees, it just seems like a step backwards. And all it does is the harder you look, you see that the same corporations, whether they change their name or put on a new name or whatever they do, you look behind the scenes and you see it's the same people. You know, you saw recently that the U.S. Steel thought that they would open a new plant and put more people to work. And then when you research U.S. Steel, you find out that's J.P. Morgan. They receive a tremendous amount of taxpayer money. And then the people who just stepped down so that someone else could come in and run U.S. Steel was the Federal Reserve Board itself. And the the public is misled with this baiting where there's a job or something's going to be created that, like I don't know the way to put it, where you tease the person and they think they're getting something, but when in reality the American is just funding their own demise.
Well, the reality is that Trump is pointing at these 800 jobs supposedly being created by the reactivation of the steel plant and this one aluminum plant. But when you look at the true scale of massive unemployment in this country, it's just a drop in the ocean, literally. And it's being put out there to try and give people hope, except that we understand we can't all live on hope. We can't pay our mortgages with hope. We can't make our car payments with hope. We need to have high-paying jobs so we can start pouring money back into the bottom of this economy. And unfortunately, the money junkies are in control. It's like having drug lords in charge of the pharmacies, which may not be too far from the truth when you look at the opioid crisis.
Right, but when you look behind the scenes, you'll see that indirectly the drug company is tied to the steel company, that's tied to the aluminum company, that's tied to the garbage collection company.
Well,
and you look
they all
the
like to
back
invest
and
in each other. It's part of loss mitigation. Anyway, Joe, I need to let you go. We've got other callers on the line, and we're racing to the top of the hour, and Wolfgang Halbig. So we're going to switch to Tom in Indiana. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Yeah, I have a friend that was a sheriff down there in that particular time period, and he told me how corrupt that place was. And to give you a little background, that captain that...
Which place are we talking about, Parkland or Sandy Hook?
No, Parkland.
Okay.
Down there. So anyway, he knew a lot of the people down there, and he said that particular captain that ordered the stand down was a lesbian that used to work in Lauderdale and then went out west. And then when she found out that there was an opening back there, I guess she goes to the Manor, which is a big lesbian bar there in that area. And what I was wondering is the video that I saw, the policemen that were cowering over outside there were all women that I saw, except for the one guy.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering that if this stands true, where these people didn't have enough testosterone to go in there, maybe that's not a good
You're
thing.
going to get the feminists on your case with that one. It's not a question of testosterone. I mean, that'll give you more muscle mass and everything. It's a question of you're trained to do a certain job in a certain circumstance, and you're supposed to do it, but they were ordered to stand down. And taken together with these two SWAT officers who wanted to go in there being suspended, obviously somebody somewhere basically wanted the scene kept clear of real police while this shooting with these body-armored people dressed all in black was taking place.
I agree that there's a place for a meter maid, but maybe not this type that what they were put into.
Well, I have to disagree with you. I have to disagree with you because one of my good friends here on the HPD is female, and she's very, very capable. So I'm going to have to let you go here because I don't like the direction where this is going. And we're going to let you go and switch over to Jeff in Georgia. Aloha, Jeff. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, thanks for letting me call. Another great show. I listened to a great human being the other day, Ken O'Keefe. He's been on RBN. He, like me, is for the nonviolent overthrow of the banking cartel. He hasn't mentioned the Jubilee or the cancellation of the national debt or of other nations, but I hope he does. I personally would print U.S. notes like John Kennedy, and I'd put his face on the $10 bill and take Hamilton's off. 2, we need to make Mexico a close ally, simply for national and regional survival. I'm not going to go into details about the history, but Mexico is a neighbor, largely Christian, highly indigenous. They have a culture that's spreading here. The language is spreading. I wouldn't even fear that. But we are a sovereign country, and I would let Mexico know that. But we need to nurture racial relations and not fall into the trap of the puppet master banking cartel. They will try to create racial strife, we have to fight against it. What's happening in South Africa needs to be spoken of. That's basically a genocide of white people down there. I don't want a genocide of Native Indians, of whites, of blacks, of nobody. But we have to speak out, but we have to nurture racial relations. And I called the other day and said why we had to. We are separated by tens of thousands of years of separate evolutionary, thousands of generations. And my next point was that, Tom Homan, nobody ever mentions, he's the acting director of ICE. And Tom Homan gets no publicity, but he has proposed that in these sanctuary cities that you could have class action lawsuits. That if the city government votes to make them sanctuary, and you have illegals that are they're committing crimes against American citizens.
That's very interesting. Yeah, the people who are living in these sanctuary cities and sanctuary counties would have a legitimate grievance with their government. They could file a class action lawsuit. But I think the short and effective version is you start going to these governors and mayors and you start throwing handcuffs on them for violations of Title VIII. And the other part of it is you've got to cut off the financial incentive for the illegals to come here. And everybody who's giving them a job or giving them free stuff is also in violation of Title VIII. And all we need to do is enforce those laws, and we won't even need a wall. Because if they step over the border, if they can't get money, if they can't get food, what are they going to do? Stand down there in Texas and Arizona and starve to death? No, they're going to turn around and go back home where they've at least got some kind of subsistence.
Michael, California, you live there and I live there. I lived in Southern California, and one reason that we, the people of California, do not oppose a lot of these illegals is there's so many of them out there, and they live all around them, and they're generally good people. They have a nice culture. They're beautiful people. Okay, and it becomes tough, to pick them out.
It all comes down to this. I mean, the good people are welcome to come here, but there is a process to be followed. And if you go through that process and you become a naturalized U.S. citizen or you get a green card, welcome to the United States of America. I hope it's not too much of a disappointment to you. But just because they're nice people is not a license to violate the national sovereignty of the United States of America. They're being brought in not because they're nice people. They're being brought in because the Democrats need them to win elections.
Michael, I live in Georgia. I go into a diner. I see all them illegals back there cooking. They're smiling. You kind of get caught up into it. I am for law and order, but Mexico should be a special exception.
I disagree.
We shouldn't treat Mexico like
I disagree.
We do.
I disagree. I'm sorry. There's a legal...
We do.
Jeff, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Okay, I haven't a problem with immigration, but there is a process to be followed. And if you follow that process, welcome. But we can't have open borders. Look at what's happening in California. Look at what's happening in Europe right now. It's an absolute disaster. And it's, at least in the United States, it's being done for purely political reasons. It's not out of any kind of humanitarian sense. It's being done so that Democrats will have more people voting for them, even though it's technically illegal for non-citizens to vote in the elections. That's what's driving this whole thing. The Democrats are flooding this country with illegal immigrants in order to make sure that they win all the future elections. And then all of the country will look just like Chicago. Massive crime in the streets, poverty for everybody except the elites. Now, getting into the area of political correctness, we're going to close the phone lines for a while because I got some news to get to before Wolfgang gets up here. Apparently, at Simmons College in Boston, it is now considered Islamophobic to say, "God bless you," when somebody sneezes. And they're calling it Islamophobic microaggression. Well, if you think about it, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all worship the same God. It goes all the way back to Abraham and his monotheistic religion. it's the same God. And the Jewish faith is there's just the one God. Christians are saying it's the same God. He had a kid. And Islam, again, further on down the road. But all three religions are effectively worshiping the same God. So why is saying God bless you Islamophobic? It really is very, very silly here. Article coming out of InfoWars, and by the way, they're putting up a really good fight about this. By the way, Ben Swan did a reality check on this purging by corporate social media of all conservative points of view, or anybody who's a vaccine critic, or anybody who criticizes any corporation. They're turning it into another corporate media TV network. But according to this article over in InfoWars, the deep state is panicking. America no longer believes us, and the intelligence community fears the American people are no longer believing the government. And we aren't. And you guys did it to yourself with that whopper about Saddam's nuclear weapons, Assad's sarin gas, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor. You can't lie to a country for hundreds of years and then all of a sudden scratch your head and understand why the American people don't believe anything you say anymore. Now, apparently, even before the purge, Facebook was losing 50 million user hours every day. People just drifting away. Now they're cracking down on conservative content. I'll tell you what's going to happen to Facebook. They're going to suffer the same fate that CNN did. People are just going to say, we're getting off of here. I don't use Facebook anymore. Don't use YouTube anymore. Don't use Twitter anymore. It's just not worth the hassles here. Now, Facebook has flagged and banned the Gateway Pundit, well, actually an article. And apparently in 2017, Harvard and Columbia Journalism Review found the Gateway Pundit was the fourth most influential conservative news source in the 2016 election. And it appears that's why they're being targeted. Because the immediate goal of all of this conservative purge is that between now and the November elections, only the liberal side of the argument will be available to people on the internet, unless they make a point of coming to conservative websites like mine. Now, over at the World Mercury Project, they have an article about the third digital revolution to unleash the power of anti-censorship. And yeah, we're already seeing new startups for social media that respect the First Amendment. We're seeing more and more people turning back to peer-to-peer to pass messages along without going through a central server. And remember how the Soviet Union's truth activists brought down that government. They used fax machines. Censorship does not work. Once the people are aware they're being propagandized and lied to, instinctively they're going to want to find what's really going on. Now, there is an app for your smartphone. There's an app for that. It's called MoviePass. And apparently it helps you get tickets to your favorite movies. And the CEO has admitted that the app actually tracks your location before and after you leave the movie. They insist they're not selling the data, but if they're not selling it or not planning to sell it, why are they collecting it? Now, the other day we were talking about this new, very intense denial of service attack, the memcached DDoS attacks. It turns out there's actually a very simple fix, and it is for the DDoS victims to send back a simple command, flush all /r/n, and it basically breaks the loop, and the attack stops. And this method has already been disclosed to various national security agencies. I think it needs to be distributed to the general public. We'll be back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're coming up on the top of the hour, and Wolfgang Halbig. As you know, they're having another major storm on the New England area, and I've traded emails with some of my relatives. One of them hasn't gotten back to me yet. But apparently power has been knocked out to something like 1 million people. So it's very, very serious, and there's yet another storm apparently out there that is coming on in. Let's see here. Apparently, according to an article over in Government Slaves, dead pets are being recycled into pet food. When you take a pet to the veterinarian and they have to be put down, apparently the veterinarians are selling the dead pets to the pet food companies. Kind of makes you wonder what they're doing with the dead homeless, doesn't it? Okay, now then. Let's see. A lot of volcano. Okay, major winter storm to hit eastern shores, eastern Nova Scotia tomorrow, in fact, here. Now, here's where liberalism and political correctness get out of control. The Ninth Circuit Court it just ruled in favor of 21 children and young adults who want to sue the U.S. government for not doing enough to protect their constitutional right to a stable climate. Constitutional right to a stable climate? I've read that Constitution several times. I keep a small copy of it right here next to my desk. It's not in there. There is no right to a stable climate. Probably because the Founding Fathers understood climate's going to change anyway. And it just tells you just how wacko the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has been. They're also the same court that's been blocking Trump in all of his immigration issues. And they've come out with some really ridiculous decisions on this matter. We already talked about it, but the FBI has been using Geek Squad employees for 10 years as paid informants to basically report on anything that's on your computers that is a tacky no-no. Stolen, copyrighted material, child porn, and I'm not in favor of child porn, but this is obviously a Fourth Amendment violation here. Meanwhile, an Inspector General audit found that Homeland Security's own IT security is a mess. They're running old and outdated software. They hadn't received patches for security for 5 years. It's amazing here. So we're coming up here on the top of the hour, and after our station identification, we should have Wolfgang Halbig on the air talking about what happened in Parkland there. Meanwhile, apparently the Fukushima Village radiation is still above the government target after the cleanup. It's still 3 times higher than the original target. And the Japanese government is already trying to get people to move back on in, go to work, start farming, start fishing, start paying taxes. So what if you glow in the dark? You know, picky people. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. Back with Wolfgang Halbig after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome to our show, hour number 3. And joining us on Skype is Wolfgang Halbig, professional school safety expert. And Wolfgang, thank you for spending time with us today. Wolfgang, are you there? Okay, we seem to have a technical issue. I'm not hearing Wolfgang. Okay. Mike, can we look into that? Okay. All right. Well, while we clear up the technical issues here, let me get some stories going. Let's see. Belgium has started giving out free iodine pills in case of nuclear disaster. And they don't appear to be all that concerned about the possibility of a nuclear war, although they ought to be. Okay, let's see. I think we have Wolfgang now. Wolfgang, are you there?
I am here.
Excellent, excellent. We got all the little technical issues ironed out there. Well, thank you for spending time with us today, and obviously we want to talk about what's going on at Parkland. It seems it's another case of there's just too many things wrong with this story, the deputies being ordered to stand down, and I've even got an email question already, which we'll get into in a little bit, but what is your overview of the Parkland shooting?
Well, there's a huge difference between my involvement in Sandy Hook and that in Parkland. in Sandy Hook, I'm a national school safety consultant, and I guess they perceived me as somebody just from the outside, trying to cause problems at Sandy Hook by asking questions. Well, in Broward County, in the Parkland school shooting, Mike, I actually wrote their school safety plan. I actually wrote their active shooter plan, their safe team. I was hired as their school safety consultant in 2006 to 2008. So I know everything there is about Broward County and Douglas High School. So I actually look forward to talking about it.
Well, one of the people who called in to my show earlier was saying that the people, the Broward County sheriffs and the police, they weren't following the plans that you wrote, that they were basically breaking with protocols. And we've been hearing that from other people as well.
And you know what? You're absolutely right. And I think anyone who's raising those concerns, they're absolutely right. The program that we wrote for Broward County, it was called Code Red. And we try to develop a program. Remember, teachers have a lot on the plate. What they don't need is another manual that they have to remember. So we developed Code Red that if there was ever an incident, such as a gun on campus or a rumor that guns are coming on campus, all the principal or his designee would have to do is students and staff, we have a Code Red. And that's something that we pray to God that no principal ever has to say on the intercom. And all that simply means we're going to try to save lives as quickly as possible. And it tells the teacher and the students, we're going to lock this door. We're going to turn out every light in this room, and we're going to move as far as we can away from that front window to where we cannot be seen. And it's so simple. That room should be dark. If somebody's trying to look in the window, they see absolutely nothing. And that's how simple it was. The plan was not followed.
Well, my understanding is that apparently there had been a fire drill earlier in the day, and there was somebody pulled a fire drill just about the time the shooting was started, and so a lot of the students were actually trapped out in the hallway, and the teachers locked the doors behind them, and they couldn't get back in the classroom. And
that's true. It was a prank fire alarm. Now you got to visualize. It's 20 minutes left in the school day. There are 3,500 students and teachers in that school. They just had a fire drill that morning, and part of the protocol and procedures, when you have a prank fire alarm, this is a school that had a history of prank fire alarms. So that we actually wrote a protocol. When a fire alarm goes off, anytime, there's a fire panel. It allows the administrators to go immediately to the panel, allow you to look at it. It actually shows you where the pull station is. All you have to do is call down to a teacher and say, look, you see smoke, fire, and it takes 40 seconds. And it allows you to make the right decisions. In this case, an assistant principal came on the intercom, and he directed everybody to evacuate. Now, something is not right here. I don't believe there's an administrator in this country that would put people at risk without checking it out first. How does he know where the fire is? Is he going to tell everybody to evacuate? And what if they're walking towards the fire? I mean, he hasn't even checked out, or she, where the fire is. See, that's our protocol. This thing has been dropped from the very beginning. And then that same administrator, I know his name, he comes on 3 minutes, 4 minutes later after we're evacuating, and he calls a Code Red. That created the biggest chaos. And Michael, I can tell you this, people died because they didn't follow procedures. This isn't about gun control. This could have saved so many lives, and it could have prevented many from being injured.
Well, it just seems like there was a good plan in place. It's common sense, especially this idea that verified that there's actually a fire, given the history of prank alarms. verify the presence of a fire before you start evacuating people. But it just seems throughout this whole tragic scenario that people were going against the plans, they were violating protocols, the police were ordered to stand down, the sheriff's deputies rather were ordered to stand down. We have that one story of a teacher who got grazed by a bullet, who described the shooter as being dressed all in black with body armor, carrying a gun that she did not recognize, complete mask. And the shooting started about 1 minute after the accused shooter, Nicholas Cruz, got out of his Uber car. No way can you do a complete change of clothing and put on body armor in less than a minute and then run up 3 flights of stairs. And we have the students who are saying that there were definitely multiple shooters. We have this one student who insists that she was talking with Nicholas Cruz when the shooting started. So again, this is shaping up. This is not what we're being told it is.
Yeah. Now think about this, Michael. You see it. I see it. All your listeners are seeing it. How is it Senator Rubio, Senator Nelson? How is it the FBI and all of our federal agencies? How is it they don't see what you and I see? Why are they not asking the same questions that you and I are asking? And Michael, look at Sandy Hook. No trauma helicopter were ever requested. Sandy Hook, no paramedics or EMTs were ever allowed in that building. At Sandy Hook, who declared all of those 20 children and teachers legally dead in 8 minutes? Now we go back to Broward County. Michael, no trauma helicopters were ever requested. They did not allow the paramedics and EMTs inside the school. And we, to this day, don't know who pronounced them all dead in Building 12. See, how is that so possible? And then to have a captain from the Broward County Sheriff's Office on the communication system telling her officers to stand down when that violates every active shooter protocol. The first officers on the scene, their job, only one job, is to get in there and neutralize the threat, kill that threat if necessary. All that was not even done.
To me, it's very, very obvious what's going on. Now, you're asking why all these politicians are not seeing this. Well, because this is all part of the gun grab agenda. And boy, they were ready to go. There were bills already sitting in various state legislatures waiting for an event like this. They got this children's march to Washington, D.C. organized very quickly, a lot of money behind that. And again, it just smacks of a propaganda operation to get us to surrender our guns. And the tragedy of it is that if we cling to our Second Amendment rights, these government actors, agencies, are going to go on shooting up more schools, trying to get what they want, a disarmed American people. The FBI, of course, is still trying to explain away the fact that there had been numerous warnings about this guy, something like a total of 41 different reports about his being potentially dangerous. The people he was living with had actually confiscated his gun and locked it in a gun cabinet, but unfortunately the kid had a key. And I'm not even convinced he actually pulled the trigger, given that story by the teacher who got a grazing shot on the arm. I think he was set up to be a patsy. CNN is now reporting he was seriously medicated when he was arrested and just drugged out of his mind. And you give people enough drugs, you can get them to think they did anything, I think.
Michael, you're really good, very observant. And this is the first mass casualty shooting we've had in this country where we now have an eyewitness. Stacy Lipple, the English teacher, she was shot of grace to the arm, but she opened the door and she allowed 4 or 5 of her kids to run into the classroom. She is very descriptive as to what she saw. She says, I was only 20 feet away. I mean, this is an English teacher. If there's one thing about English teachers, they know how to describe things in detail. And she says, what really bothers me, she says, I saw a gun that I've never seen before. And she actually uses the word police officer. Now, you know what? I have talked to the teacher union president in Broward County. I've talked to the FBI. I'm worried about her safety. When you have an eyewitness and that eyewitness points the finger at law enforcement, they have a tendency to have a heart attack. They disappear. And I'm concerned, and I have written emails to the superintendent, to the school board members, because I was their safety consultant. And I am telling you, I am concerned for the safety of that teacher.
I agree with you. I agree with you. She's definitely a liability. But what was interesting is she did not see any lettering on the body armor outfit of the shooter. And normally when you have somebody who's dressed up like that, there are large letters stenciled on them, whether it's police or FBI or SWAT or something like that, to identify them as being the good guys. And she said she didn't see any of that. So it may have been police, it may have been special forces. We do know that there's a video of 3 adult males running out of the school, throwing some duffel bags into the back of a truck and speeding off. And that is still without any explanation.
Absolutely. I saw that video, and did you notice it took 2 people in black clothing? They took that big duffel bag and they threw it in the back of a pickup truck. Did you know it was a white pickup truck?
Yes.
Not any sign, nothing on it.
Yes.
And I like what you said. Nicholas Cruz could not have gotten out of that Uber and changed in their clothing, shot all of those people, changed back into his regular clothing, and just walk off camera. It's impossible. That's what we call in law enforcement reasonable doubt.
I would definitely agree with that. But unfortunately, when these things are set up, reasonable doubt is not allowed into the courtroom. In the Boston Marathon bombing, it was very obvious that the backpacks that contained the bombs were black with this recognizable white patch on top. The Tsarnaev brothers, photographed at the scene just before the explosion, one had a white backpack, and the other one had a gray one. But there were these gentlemen who were in the area wearing black jackets and khaki pants. When they were standing together, it was obvious it was a uniform, and one of those guys was photographed with a black pack with that white rectangular patch. Now, to me, that is also reasonable doubt. But the Dzhokhar Tsarnaev's attorney, apparently appointed by the government, just walked on into the trial and said, yeah, he did it. He pleads for mercy. It was a kangaroo court. And despite the reasonable doubt, they're going to fry this Nicholas Cruz and to protect the official story. We have a couple of callers waiting on the line. Are you willing to answer some questions from our listeners?
Absolutely. Absolutely, for you and everything, my friend.
All right, well, thank you very much. And we're going to start with Dennis in Indiana. Aloha, Dennis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I just have a question. I've never heard it yet, and of course, I don't get to see the TV. I'm a paralyzed person that listens to radio, and I am wondering, through all the things that I have heard, why, if the teacher saw all that garb on that kid, who in the world took the garb and did DNA on it and were was the witnesses to do the DNA on it to say that that kid had that stuff on, even the clothing DNA, strands of clothing, would be on the chest or even on his mask and even on his gas mask and his helmet too.
Well, see, that was never recovered.
Skin or anything.
It was never recovered.
I know. That's why we want to know who took it.
And that's what we're trying to find out too. We saw, I believe, being loaded into a pickup truck. Now, where did it go? Michael and I don't know that, but I totally agree with you. There should have been gunpowder paraffin test done on his hands, but did you notice how many police officers touched him? I mean, they didn't even protect his hands, so when they do a paraffin test, that it would be conclusive. People had their hands all over this kid. And what do police officers have? And use guns so they could transfer. I mean, there are so many questions, and I'm glad that you called in to ask us this.
Yeah, I feel the governor and whoever else down there, a lawyer or anybody, a governor down there needs to ask for that video to be re-put on the air, whoever the video came from, of that white truck. And it's studied immensely.
Well, let me share this with you. I was the consultant. I've been on that campus several times, There are 22 cameras inside that school. It's called the 9th grade center. And the reason I was so adamant about having those CCT cameras in there, these are 9th graders. And there are 3 floors. And 9th graders have a tendency to be mischievous with girls in those hallways and stairwells. So we had to put those cameras in there for liability reasons. So if something were to happen, at least we recorded it. Did you know that the sheriff, Israel, he took possession of the entire video cameras? He's not allowed to do that. He can have a copy of it. Right.
Yeah, that's obstruction of justice if he's hiding it.
The video is the property of the Broward County School Board. Now, he can have a warrant. He can have a search warrant. Yes, he can get a copy of it, but he can't own it and control it. And that's what he's doing.
Yeah, because that's admissible evidence that he is messing with, and whoever else he's had messed with it.
Well, in Columbine, after 3 days, we, the people across America, actually got to see the shooters in the cafeteria, all decked out with their guns. Now, you know what? We saw it live on TV. So why are they hiding this one? All they have to do is show us, we the people, show me Nicholas Cruz in the stairwell, show him in the hallway, show him entering the school and leaving the school, and in the question. See, I mean, this is simple, and they are interfering with justice.
Yeah.
Well, basically, they're relying on the claim that Nicholas Cruz confessed immediately, and that's what they're standing on. We don't need to do forensics. We don't need to look at videos. Nicholas Cruz has confessed his guilt. You know, we're going to send him off, and that's the end of the story. Meanwhile, of course, we're seeing.
Sounds like he's getting. He sounds like he's getting, no due justice first.
He's not really getting due process. No attorney who's representing his client, she should never, ever say he's guilty. A good attorney who's representing the client like Nicholas, she should fight for him as hard as possible. She's done nothing except hanging out to dry.
Okay, Dennis, we're going to have to let you go. We've got to do a commercial break. So, Dennis, thank you very much for the phone call, and we'll be back with more phone calls after this. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Wolfgang Halbig, professional school safety consultant. You've probably heard his name in connection with questions regarding Sandy Hook, and he's here to talk with us today about Parkland. Before we go back to the phones, and they are loaded up right now, to me, one of the most obvious signs that this was a staged event is the sheer panic that has been displayed by the corporate social media in trying to suppress any posts or videos that question the official story. The video of the 3 guys with the duffel bag in the truck was put up on YouTube, was immediately taken down. It's now surfaced again on other more First Amendment friendly video places. The video interview of the teacher who saw the guy all in black, the shooter, that keeps getting taken down. And now we're finding that YouTube, Facebook, and Google and Twitter are now automating filters where anybody that is known to be suspicious of the official story of Parkland is just being shadow banned. And that kind of a panic reaction, obviously this is not something Nicholas Cruz is able to orchestrate for himself. It has to be coming from above. So let's go back to the phones, and we've got Chris in St. Petersburg. Aloha, Chris. Do you have a question for Wolfgang Halbig?
Yes, a question and a few comments. First question is, I learned last night on Coast to Coast AM that when Joel Skousen was guest, he mentioned that there is a video of 3 burly men getting into the pickup truck. I'm trying to locate that video, so I was wondering if either of you have seen the video where Joel Skousen described 3 or 4 burly guys bringing out.
It just went up on the front of whatreallyhappened.com. The headline is video footage shows multiple police officers, and you click it, and it goes right to the video.
Great. Okay. And 3 days ago, March 5th, Florida Senate Bill 7026 passed, or now this has to be signed by Rick Scott, who most likely will sign it because he's always been a supporter of it, unless we maybe encourage him to not sign it. It makes it illegal for anyone to own a firearm under the age of 21. And also bans bump stocks and it's a very vague definition. I won't get into it, but if you want to check out a great article at thetruthaboutguns.com entitled Breaking Florida Republicans Pass Gun Control Bill by Luis Valdez, dated March 7th, yesterday. It breaks it down in great detail. But yeah, the point I take on the Parkland shooting, some points I want to make are that video that Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel said exists. He did not give so much as a lame excuse as to why he's withholding that video. He says it describes a sheriff standing down. Of course, now we know that there were a total of 5 cops who stood down. And so, for them to withhold the video is a violation of the Florida Sunshine Law, where any public official in the course of their duty, any public records must be disclosed. And a few days ago, when I called into a local talk show, a host told me that there are certain news outlets who are suing to have that disclosed. I haven't had the time yet to look into any of those suits. But just to point out that first we have teacher Ernest Rospierski said that the shooter had on a mask and that there was a code red drill going on where the officers would be firing blanks. This is an Associated Press video where he's saying all this. And he said that the shooter had on a mask. Then we have teacher Stacy Lippel, you mentioned Wolfgang. Stacy Lippel on Good Morning America said the shooter was wearing full metal body armor, a helmet, and a face mask. Maybe this shooter is different from the one who teacher Ernest Rospierski saw. Then we have student Alexa Miednick said she was speaking with Nicholas Cruz as the shooting was happening, or after the shots were fired, but then she does not mention that he was wearing a mask or any other garb like armor. And she said, quote, so there definitely had to be 2 shooters involved, I believe. So apparently there's these 3 accounts indicate that there were at least 2 shooters. And, where would Cruz have had the time to not only put on the garb, as you mentioned, but to take it off? And just before speaking with Alexa Miednick, she said that quote, because when shots were fired, I saw him after the fact, and the shots were coming from the other part of the building, so there definitely had to be 2 shooters involved, I believe. Now, she should be questioned further and asked if she meant that Cruz was away from or opposite to her from the part of the building from where shots were heard. But still, she obviously does not believe that Cruz was the shooter, because she was talking to him and said that she was surprised. She was expressing to him her surprise that he was not the shooter.
Yeah, well, again, what you pointed out, reasonable doubt. Yesterday, Nicholas Cruz was indicted.
Wolfgang, I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah. We have to take another commercial break, but hold that response, and you can respond to Chris after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Wolfgang Halbig. And Wolfgang, you were going to respond to Chris's points that he made.
Well, he makes great points, and every point he brings up is called reasonable doubt. Yesterday, in the grand jury, they indicted Nicholas Cruz on 17 counts of homicide. Now, the question is, did they allow Stacy Lippel to testify, allowed her to give her testimony before the grand jury? Nicholas Cruz's attorney was present during the inquiry before the grand jury. Why didn't they bring in the CCTV camera system to prove that it was Nicholas Cruz? None of that even happened. And you see, that's not due process. Our system is broken, and we the people, I'm begging we the people, enough is enough. These mass casualty shootings have to stop, and somebody's got to be held accountable, and only we the people can make that happen.
Well, a couple of other points that are sticking in my mind. First of all, this very bizarre situation where the Florida Attorney General has promised the state of Florida will pay for the funeral expenses of the school shooting victims. Now, that seems a little bit odd. If a drunk driver kills a bunch of people in a crosswalk, the families are responsible for those funeral expenses. So it almost seems like institutionally the state of Florida is apologizing for what they did to these 17 kids to push the gun grabber agenda. The other point I want to make is we have an eyewitness to a shooter dressed in military police-style body armor. Now, if that had been Nicholas Cruz inside there, remember, he was seen walking away from the school with the other students in his ordinary clothes, the clothes that he'd ridden in the Uber car with, the clothes that he was arrested in. So that black outfit and rifle should have still been in the school somewhere, but it's never been found.
That's true. Well, and the other point, I have a good friend that I went. At Sandy Hook, we saw the triage area in the parking lot at the school. Remember the red tarp and the blue tarp and yellow? And then they had another triage area up by the firehouse. Now, I want you to visualize this. Where do you think they had the triage area set up at Broward County at that school? Would you think it'd be close to the school? I mean, in the parking lot somewhere?
That's what I would assume.
It was over 500 yards from the front entrance of the school. Think about it, 500 yards. So here's the question. How did those 17 people that were shot inside Building 12, how did they get to the triage area when they never allowed the paramedics or the EMTs inside the school to treat them?
That's a very, very good question. I mean, one of the EMTs went public saying that probably some of those kids simply bled to death because they weren't allowed to get to them. More dead, more shock value to push the gun grabber agenda.
But see, that's where the listeners ought to get angry. What if that was your child? What if that was your student? What if that was your child? And, you know, they had a big interview, you know, at the hospital with the doctors and the surgeons and the fire department. And this girl that they had on there, she was supposedly shot in the chest with an AR-15 .223 caliber. She was shot in the stomach, and she had other multiple shots on her body. How did they get her from Building 12 into the hospital? No trauma helicopter? That's what I would call a severely injured child.
Yes.
I mean, major trauma. And what did they do? Put her on the golf cart? I don't see. We deserve those answers, and that's why we're here today. We're just asking for help. We're asking for the truth. We're not trying to create problems, but the people of America are tired of these mass killings. And the agenda, gun grab, no, I think it's to divide the country. Every time we have one of these, it's heartbreaking for all the family members. They are dividing this country, and it's got to stop.
I agree with you on that one. But certainly the gun grabbers are exploiting these mass staged shootings. Let's go back to the phones here. We got a bunch of calls. I don't think we're going to get to all of the callers. I apologize up front. Francis in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha to you, both fellas. I had given the video about the teacher's comments to a relative of mine, and in short, after they had seen it and heard what was being said, you would be stunned at the response that they gave me is that, oh, she was in shock, and so she would describe what she thought she saw, and so basically the teacher was hallucinating. And I thought, I was so stunned by the comment, I couldn't believe I was hearing it from the relative. So, thanks so much.
All right, thank you. Any comments, Wolfgang?
Well, again, this shows you how we listen to the national news media, and thank God we finally had a president, Trump, who actually went out publicly and said fake news. No president has ever called these national news organizations out. And I think he's starting to realize what they're trying to do to this country. Again, it's done like watching a movie. You know, she's shocked. No, she's not. Let me tell you something. She looked at that person. She described him in detail. People in shock don't do that.
No, they don't. And I think that reaction, oh, she's just in shock, she's making it up or something. Yep. We still have, unfortunately, a lot of people in this country who are simply scared to face up to what's going on in this country and right now. And they'll just gratefully grab whatever propaganda is handed to them in the hope that they'll be left alone. It's called the good German syndrome. The same thing happened in Nazi Germany. The people of Germany, even those who knew something was horribly wrong, stayed silent, made excuses for the government, made excuses for everything, and they still wound up losing their country. But the number of people who are out there still clinging to the propaganda is clearly in decline, which is why the corporate media, corporate social media, have hit the panic button. And again, the sheer ferocity with which all of these videos and articles questioning the Parkland story are being erased from the internet tells you that there is a gigantic cover-up in place, and it's up to us to figure out exactly what is being covered up. So let's take another phone call here. Fred in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good evening. Chris Hinckley has reported that this guy, Hershey Brownstein, who is the head rabbi, Shabbat Lubavitch in Parkland, released a video, a real-time video, rather shaky, but nonetheless showing crews cruising on down the boulevard there from the school en route to wherever, I guess, Walmart, I don't know. And then he cites the fact, as does Henry Makow, Wolfgang. If you don't know about Henry Makow, he features a stellar 5-part expose, which this audience really needs to scrutinize, in which a stellar international journalist, Yoshi Shimatsu, who was raised in a Orthodox Jewish community in Brooklyn, he breaks it all down. He cites a network, a very covert dark ops network called Sham Rem, whatever. And they are a battle-hardened IDF assassins team assigned as Sionim to the network of Shabbat Lubavitch communitarian synagogues.
Okay, you're trying to pin this. You're trying to pin this on the Jews again, and again. I favor Occam's razor. I favor Occam's razor. Now I know that Israel and the U.S.
There's way more to it than
Hang on.
Occam's razor is a joke.
On.
It's a joke.
Okay.
Occam's razor is a joke.
All right.
So we have a common enemy.
Okay, we're going to drop Fred here, and we're going to go to Neil in California. And Neil, before you start talking, yeah, Occam's razor does work, the simplest explanation. Now, I do know that Israel cooperated with the U.S. government on 9/11, and maybe they had some ringers come on in for this. But this was clearly an operation internal to the United States of America, simply because of all the players involved. The FBI ignoring all the warnings about this Nicholas Cruz, the order from the Sheriff's Department to stand down, the blocking of the EMTs. This is a domestic operation, and I think somebody's trying to lay a false trail. So, Neil, are you there?
Michael, I also believe that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of Florida, she needs to be challenged on why would she pay for all of the funerals. That's unheard of.
I absolutely agree. Neil, are you on the line?
Yes, I am, Michael. Aloha, Michael, Wolfgang in the United States of America. I love that you brought up the teacher who was actually shot or grazed by a bullet. Looked at the shooter, did not see or say it was Nicholas Cruz. She said all of this on, what was that, Good Morning America, NBC, and the woman who interviewed her is a journalist and didn't follow up on what she just said. What do you mean? You thought it was the police? Right? So right there is your news media cover-up to push the story. And then you have, I've never seen more videos disappear I thought Vegas videos disappeared fast. These videos have disappeared faster. And then now connect the dots with all these people. Who was one of the sheriff's best friends was Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the Clinton gang. Talk about a cover-up and let's get things going on. But you have EMTs saying they were told not to go in. You have 4 cops saying they were not supposed to go in. Now I hear that the SWAT team was not supposed to go in. Wolfgang, your job was this protocol. When does protocol like this change or go random? I mean, I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried. All the witnesses who said multiple shooters coming up both sides of the stairs, where is the footage from the school? We heard there was 20-minute delay in your cameras. It sounds like nothing worked. And if any federal agency or government is going to help us, they failed 100%. My question is, if I was a lawyer, where is a lawyer that I would like to be right now to offer my services not to defend a mass murderer, but to get the evidence that is so overwhelmingly proven to contradict what is being said? I watched this guy Cruz walk into a courtroom this morning, looked more drugged out than any drunk or drugged out person I've ever seen walking in a club, had to have people help him to his seat. And when his lawyer, that blonde woman, leaned over to talk to him, he didn't even acknowledge that she was there and talking to him. So how can that go in court?
Well, that's a great point. And you bringing the attorneys up, Michael, my recommendation to your viewers and to every program I ever get a chance to speak to, I think it's time for a class action lawsuit. I think we, the people, need to come together and finally have the courage to file a class action lawsuit in order to get the truth. We, the people, have a right to know the truth. And why are we not coming together and demanding it? This is dividing the country. It's hurting all of us. It's inflicting emotional distress to people who don't deserve to be inflicted by it.
I agree 100%, and I would like to make a plea to any lawyer in the United States that would pro bono his services to actually legally, did he get appointed a court lawyer? Is this his lawyer? Is this a public defender?
She's a public defender, and she doesn't even defend him. She basically says he's going to plead guilty. No lawyer hangs out. Yeah, you don't do that.
When I heard that the other day, that they already had a plea in for a mass murder, how do you plea for a mass murder? That doesn't make any legal sense. And like I said, I'm not a lawyer. If I was a lawyer, I would pro bono myself to go take over for what she apparently is not doing for someone who apparently was so drugged out and is still drugged out. I mean, he looked like a zombie walking in court.
Well, I'll tell you right now, the judge is not going to allow a change of attorneys. That court exists to basically just railroad this guy into prison or the electric chair as quickly as possible. They're hitting the panic button on this one. They're realizing that more and more people have become very suspicious about these shootings. So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and I apologize to everybody else who's holding on line. We're running out of time, and we're not going to be able to get to your phone calls, and the lines are now closed. Since I have you here, you designed that closed-circuit television system in that school. Is there a 20-minute delay between what the cameras are seeing and what is seen on the monitors?
Hey, I'm glad that you brought that up. No, there's not. When we install CCTV cameras, high definitions, they have to conform to the standards that if there was an incident that ever unfolds in the area where those cameras are for liability reasons, that they can be taken into a courtroom as evidence. And if you have a 20-minute delay in it, you can't bring it into a courtroom because it's not real time. And here's the thing, those CCTV camera, the monitors, the recording devices, They were kept in that school resource officer's office at the school. You know, one of the things he's required to do every morning when he comes to work, he looks at that, makes sure the date's correct, the time's correct. Someone had to program that 20-minute delay in. Again, somebody is directing somebody to do something that's not something that we do on a daily basis. And again, it's like the assistant principal telling people to evacuate. Listen, that man is smarter than that. He was directed to do that. And we need to find out who was in charge of this illusion.
Well, I would like to point a finger of suspicion at the FBI itself, and maybe the reason that they ignored all these warnings about Nicholas Cruz is they were grooming him to be the patsy, to set him up to take the fall for this. Anyway, we have to take another break. We have to take another break for a commercial. We'll be back with the last segment of our program with Wolfgang Halbig after these few words. Aloha America, welcome back to the show here, last segment of our program today. And Wolfgang, you've got about 4 minutes to say whatever you want to say to our listeners.
Well, first of all, if anybody knows a lottery winner out there anywhere in the United States, tell them we need help. We're about to hire an attorney for the Broward County shooting in order to get all these public records. But I'm going to tell you something. I don't see attorneys jumping out of the woodwork. Nobody came out of the woodwork to try to help me with Sandy Hook. And it's challenging to find attorneys that are willing to stand up for the Constitution, for the privacy, First Amendment, Second Amendment. Where are all of these attorneys that are supposed to have the courage to defend justice? See, I find that very, very frustrating right now. And but we're going to find the truth. I just want you to know that. I will not let go of this. And the thing is, they cannot call me a conspiracy theorist anymore like they did in Sandy Hook. I mean, they called me a hoaxer, a fraud, a liar, a cheat. They destroyed my business. Now, in Broward County, I'm their expert. Michael, I was the safety school consultant for 43 out of 67 counties in Florida. Now, don't you think I earned the trust of those school superintendents and board members?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything you say makes sense, and your inside knowledge. Yeah, they can't keep you outside on this one.
Nope, and I look forward to answering any questions that people have, and if they want to call me, my number's always out there, 352-729-2559. And you know, in my 24 years being a safety consultant, I have never, ever been questioned or challenged on anything until I started asking those questions at Sandy Hook. Why no trauma helicopter? Why would you not let the paramedics and EMTs inside the school? Who ordered the porta potties? With all those porta potties being 3 hours, but you can't get trauma helicopters for these little children cleaning the life? See, it just doesn't make sense. And we have got to be smarter. And we got to not be afraid to challenge the government.
Well, that's certainly what our job here is at Republic Broadcasting and WhatReallyHappened.com. Wolfgang, thank you very much, and I'd like to have you back maybe in a few weeks to see if there's any new developments about Parkland.
Anytime, sir. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for spending time with us today. And once again, that was Wolfgang Halbig, professional school safety consultant. He's the expert on how these things should be handled. And his observations both at Sandy Hook and at Parkland was that protocols were broken. Police were told to stand down. EMTs forbidden to go inside where they might have saved life. Even the EMTs are angry, saying that their training is you go on in. You risk the active shooter. You need to get to those patients as quickly as possible. And they're very angry that some of those kids died from medical neglect while the EMTs were being kept outside. So this one just stinks all over of another government staged operation to push the gun grabber agenda. Okay, there's the music. It's time for me to get off the air, make room for John Stedmiller, who's coming on next. I'm sure he's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here and share it with everyone that you know. Use mailing lists, use anything except the social corporate media, because it's no longer a reliable means of communicating with the public. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.